Welcome back to Saturday Sampler at Close to Home. This is our basic block for October of 2020. As you can see, it's a 9-patch made up of 3 very simple blocks. The corner blocks, which we're going to go over today, are a 4-inch finished cat's cradle. The north, south, east, and west blocks are made up of a large flying geese, 2x4, and a strip set. And then, of course, we have one half square triangle that forms a pinwheel in the center. All right. So we've gone over, let's go over a few things here. We've gone over the flying geese in the May video of this year for basic. So you can look back on the May video to get instructions for those. The strip sets are very simple. We're just sewing our 1.5 by 4.5s together and creating our little 4-inch pieces units right there. The only difference before I get to the cat's cradle is the pinwheel. So what I'm having you do this month for the pinwheel is to cut 3-inch squares, 2 white and 2 green. When you draw your diagonal line on the wrong side of the white and sew on either side, you're going to end up with an oversized half square triangle. So this oversized half square triangle is not ready to be put into the pinwheel quite yet. What we need to do is to trim down these half squares to a 2.5-inch square. And I'm going to take one over to my cutting table. I'm going to show you that in a second. But first, we're going to go over the cutting instructions. So for the basic October sampler, from our white strip, the first thing you want to do is cut a very long strip 1.5 inches wide. That's going to be part of our strip set that goes with the green. The next thing you're going to do is a nice long wide 3 3/4 and cut 4 2 3/4 by 3 3/4 rectangles. From the remainder of that 3 3/4 piece, cut 2 3-inch squares. For the orange, pretty simple. We're going to cut a nice 5.5-inch strip across our white piece in our kit. From the first one, we're going to get a 5.5-inch square. Then we're going to cut those into 2 3/4, 2 3/4, and of course, cut them 2 3/4 to make a square.
You meant to say orange, right?
Orange. Yes, orange. Thank you. And then the last one's the green. There's others, but these are the little tougher ones to cut for your kit. So the green you can cut into a full 3-inch strip. Cut 2 3-inch squares out of that strip. And then what you're going to have to do is cut 2 4.5 inches, and then we're going to cut them in half to be 1.5 and 1.5, just like this. All the cutting instructions are on your handouts that you're going to be getting with your kit. So there's others which are very easy to cut, but those were the harder ones, the white, orange, and the green. So we're going to get started looking at the cat's cradle. This is a new ruler for basic this year. We have done it in the past years. I want to make sure that everybody understands the basics of this ruler. There are really 3 areas of this ruler that we need to keep watch on. The finished block size. So we can use this ruler to do this cat's cradle shape in any of these 6 sizes, finished sizes. Today's cat's cradle is a finished square at 4-inch. So we're going to cut these shapes, and these shapes, and they're all in your cutting instructions. And I've gone over the white and the orange, and then the other one is a light blue, which is very simple. Next thing we want to do is look at where it has the marked sewing line. So when we place this on a seam line, we're going to use our friction pen, and we're actually going to use this line to mark it. That's step number 2. Step number 3 is actually trimming a 1/4 inch seam, and you can get that 1/4 inch seam from using either this side of the ruler or this side of the ruler. And the very last is trimming up our cat's cradle to the 4-inch finished square using these diagonal lines and this 4-inch solid line. So let's get started and make a cat's cradle. First things we're going to have to do is, it says to make 2 cat's cradles, we're going to use 1 piece that's 5 by 6, 2 rectangles that are 2 3/4 by 3 3/4, which I had you cut. And then the last is these orange pieces, and they are cut at 2 3/4 square. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is sew our squares to the ends of our rectangles. So we'll take this orange, make sure you have the white right side up and the orange right side down, right sides together. The white is a little tough to see, but we will put these together. So we're going to sew 1/4 inch, just adding our squares at the ends. Okay. All right. So make sure you have your 1/4 inch foot, and I have pressed all my pieces in the kit with Mary Ellen's Best Press before I cut any of the pieces. All right, very important to give your fabric a little bit of stability. Okay, and again, a 1/4 inch on the end of this one. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the ironing board, and we're going to press these toward the rectangles, which is right here. So if they're getting pressed toward the rectangles, I need the rectangles on the top. A little bit of heat, flip and hold. A little bit of heat, flip and hold. All right. With these 2 rectangles, we're going to sew them together with the oranges on the opposite ends. So as I place these on top of each other, I'm going to now stitch 1/4 inch down this side of this unit. Okay, let's do that. This will make 2 cat's cradles. Make sure you don't flip your seam. This one's nice because it's going toward me, but the one underneath is going away from me. So make sure you keep that nice and flat in that direction. Next thing we want to do is to cut a small slice into our seam allowance between the 2 seams. So here and here, I have a seam there and I have a seam here. So what's about average is right about here, right in the center. And all I did was create a little notch right there, a little cut. So now we're going to go back to the iron, and again, everything gets pressed toward the rectangles. So this gets pressed this direction and that one in that direction. All right. So let's go grab our ruler for the cat's cradle. And this is the first area that we need to look at, is called the marking sew line. So it's labeled right here, oops, sorry, with the light. It's called the marking sew line. And we're going to place on the seam line these solid black lines on the seam lines of our orange square. So I'm going to place it so that my black line on the ruler lays right on top of my seam line. And the intersection where I'm going to be drawing my line hits that notch right here where my corner of my orange is. Okay, and that's our sewing line. So let's do this again. We're going to mark our line so we know where to sew. Take our friction pen, and we're going to mark the entire length. Okay? And you'll notice that this line intersects with that corner, which is going to be great because when I sew on it, it's going to come out right to the corner. So let's flip it around, and we'll do it one more time. Place on the seam line. So I place that on my seam line. My intersection right here is right where I want it to be. And I'll go ahead and draw this line. Okay? Next thing we want to do is put it with our light blue 5x6 rectangle. Right on top, right sides together. And we're going to sew right on the line we just drew. And again, intersecting right at that corner, not up here, but right across the corner. So let's go sew that. So we'll start right up here. I'm sewing on the line, making sure not to flip any of my seams. When I get to here, I just want to make sure I go nice and slow, hit that intersection, and continue down my drawn line. And we'll come back and we'll do the other side. This corner should hit somewhere close to the corner. Approach it. And we want to hit right on that corner, right on that line. All right, we're going to get out our ruler and we're going to trim these apart. So once again, on this ruler, we now have what's called a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because this is a creative grid ruler, it has grips exactly where we need it, which is right under this 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can either use this side or this side, but the line, the solid black line, is going on our seam line, and we're going to trim it at 1/4 inch. So here we go. Here's our sewn line, that orange line that goes straight across, and we're going to place our ruler with the 1/4 inch seam allowance 1/4 inch away from our drawn line, or our sewn line. And we're going to go ahead and trim that away. So as you can see, I now have 1/4 inch seam. So we need to do the same thing to this triangle. So I'm going to turn that around. Again, place my 1/4 inch seam allowance marking with the black solid line on my sewn line, and go ahead and give this a trim. And once again, I have another 1/4 inch seam. Okay. The next thing we want to do is press toward the large triangle. So we're going to be pressing in this direction, toward the light blue. So if I'm pressing toward the light blue is up, and I'm going to flip it up. Look at that, how it gets so nice and close. And I didn't make a single triangle. I didn't have to cut any triangles to get that shape. And once again, a little bit of heat, making sure, oops, I don't have that thread, making sure that these are nice and pressed, even on the edges here, and not folded over. Okay, so nice and flat. And the last thing we get to do is trim them away. Don't forget to trim. So here is this piece that I was talking about earlier with the trim to size. So now we're going to use, is that okay? No. What do you want, down?
Lean it.
Oh, this way.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So we want to be able to look at this trim to size, lay our orange square on that solid black line, and the diagonal that we have between the light blue and the white and the orange along this dashed line. So we're going to trim away two sides first. We'll rotate it. I'll show you one more little trick to get it centered, and we'll trim the other two sides. Okay? So we're going to trim the orange corner first by placing the 4-inch mark, because we're doing a 4-inch finished. And you see these dashed lines going across here? These are going to go right on top of our seam line. Okay, so I have my dashed lines here. I have my solid line along the 4. I can go ahead and trim away two sides. Okay. Oops. All right, so that's half of it. We need to turn this around and now trim this side. So what we're going to do is that same diagonal line is going to go straight across our square. The line that goes up through the center is going to go through the center of our corner. And this little, it's hard to see against the blue, but this little point here where it says 4 is touching, just kissing that little piece of the orange right there on the at that intersection. So line up those dashed lines, line up that dashed line, and go ahead and trim it to size. There we go. We have our cat's cradle. Yay. So you're going to be making 4 of these for each corner of your block. The last thing I did want to show you is how to trim down your oversized half square triangle to a 2.5-inch square. Because remember, they have to finish at 2. So in this case, on my Creative Grid ruler, I'm using the 1/2-inch markings on my square, and I'm placing the 45-degree line right along the 45-degree line of my half square triangle. As long as I have a little extra fabric beyond that 2.5, I can trim this side as well. So I'm going to trim here and here, knowing that my line is right down the center, and that when I flip it around, I'll have that much to trim from the other two. So we're going to bring this down to this size, and then we're going to rotate it, and it's going to go right into this 2.5-inch mark here and here. Make sure it's 2.5, and we'll go ahead and trim that again. Having that 45-degree angle on your Creative Grid ruler really helps give you half white, half green. Keeps it nice and even as far as that's concerned. So you're going to make a pinwheel out of these. And we're going to sew those together to make our center piece. We're going to take our flying geese and we're going to sew them together with our strip sets, with the blue against the green. Or if you want to experiment and you want to change your block up a little bit, you can rotate these any way you'd like. You could put the white against the blue, you can put the orange against the white. It will give you a whole different look. Okay, so maybe you want to play with that a little bit before you sew those together. But for today's block, we're putting the blue right next to the green. Make 4 of those units, and of course we've done our 4 cat's cradles. And again, all of these finish at 4 inches. So when we're done, we're just going to assemble a 9-patch block. Thank you again for watching. You can come pick up your basic October sampler kits on Saturday the 17th. That's this Saturday, October 17th at 10 a.m. We'll be open. Thanks again for watching. Bye.